All right, welcome to the 39th episode of the Wagtails podcast. I'm so lucky this afternoon, well, it's this afternoon for Laurie, so I'm going to talk in those terms, to be sitting down with Laurie and having a conversation. So, welcome to the podcast, Laurie.
Megan, thank you so much for having me.
I always start the podcast, Laurie, by asking my guest, what are you excited about at the moment? So, that could be personally, professionally, whatever comes up.
Yeah. Well, okay, so personally, I'm excited that for the next, after, let's say, in 10 days or a week, I'm going to have 3 weeks off. And this is like my break. So our bodies tell us when we, need to just step back. And I'm so grateful for this work, but it feels like it's time just to be a bit stiller, and to reflect and on this incredibly busy year. And just to, I think, reflection and just giving myself some time.
Yeah,
I
sounds
think,
good.
per- I think, I think professionally, I'm very excited about just the spread and the seeding of the applied educational neuroscience framework. It's just making its way around the globe. And I feel so grateful.
I'm excited about that as well, Laurie. And I've been following your work for a very long time. I was just telling you before that I was in the classroom and then I was a school leader for quite a long time. And always looking for people like you that are leading the way in the neuroscience space. So, did you want to maybe tell us a little bit about what that's looking like what's rolling out at the
Mhm.
moment?
Yeah, so this framework that's what it is. It really is, it's called the Applied Educational Neuroscience Framework. And it began, just about, I started writing and thinking and reflecting upon it about 12 years ago. And it was a white paper, actually. And I was at a different university. So it's kind of fun to see the evolution of the framework. I feel like it has wings of its own. Um, and then so the framework itself is really about us personally, not just professionally. And I really want to
Mm,
emphasize that when we are integrating this into the schools or organizations and communities, it really is about me as a mom. It's about me as, a partner in my marriage. It's about me as, as a sister. We carry in, I always say this, but we carry in who we are when we go to work. And so we have to be very respectful and aware that our worries, our anxieties, the sensations that we feel in our body, not to ignore those or repress those, but to be aware and to acknowledge that we are living systems. And when
mm.
we walk into our schools, yes, it too is a living system, but we have to be very, what's the word I want to say? I think really authentic with ourselves and honest that sometimes we can dysregulate everybody around us based on, what we're experiencing and not meaning to, because we know that emotions are so contagious. So the framework is built on 4 pillars. It begins with the adult nervous system, and then it moves into co-regulation, which is really, as Deb Dana, who's a wonderful trauma therapist, says, this is our biological imperative. And we are social, communal creatures. And it's something where we intuitively know co-regulation because we need to be co-regulated our entire lifetime. We never
Mm.
grow out of it, but it really is being able to share a safe, emotionally available space with a child or adolescent who needs to borrow a little of our groundedness. And then the third pillar, touch points, which are micro moments of connection. I think a lot of speakers and researchers have different terms, but we mean the same thing. I think Dr. Bruce Perry calls that therapeutic dosing. Um, and for me in the schools, it feels very aligned. What a touch point is a smile, a touch point is how we
Mm.
greet a child. Things again that we do intuitively, but sometimes with children who carry in pain-based behaviors, we need to be more intentional with those touch points. And then the fourth pillar, we show the leaves changing on the trees in the graphic because it really is delving beneath behavior and teaching our children and youth as we learn about the language of the nervous system, which is sensation.
Yeah. Oh, so powerful. And I'm just so pleased to hear there's so much focus on the individual person, like the adult in the space, coming to know about
Absolutely.
themselves. Because, in all honesty, Laurie, when I started in this field, which was coming up, it's close to 20 years ago, it actually was less focused on us as the adults. And it was a little bit more around trauma informed practice is something we're applying to the young people we're working with. So apply, apply,
Exactly.
apply. And just suppress what's going on inside you and just, do your best to show up and be calm and steady without really thinking, what does that actually mean? And what do I need to do? And what am I bringing into the space?
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, it's so true. And that sense of belonging, feeling seen and heard and felt is a part of our biology. And so we talk about relationships cognitively. We talk
Mm,
about, how important it is to strengthen relationships and or strengthen connection. But there is a significant, biological impact on the nervous system when we are feeling that sense of belonging. And
mm,
it's such a part of it actually attachment develops the nervous system. We don't
mm.
do well without it.
Yeah. And so as adults also. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm curious, Laurie, what you're seeing going on around cultures of schools then when they are starting to apply this. Because what I notice when I work alongside schools at the moment, sometimes there's a resistance in the adults to go, oh, are we going to talk
hmm
about our stress? Are we going to talk about the sensations going on in our bodies? Are we going to share that with colleagues and not be judged for that? Or not be seen as
hmm
incompetent if I'm coming in and I'm having multiple days of challenging sensations going on?
But I think we're cracking the code right now because the resistance is real.
Mm,
And I understand that. I've been in education 35 years. And we very few adults who are in the educational arena were really trained or prepared to really look at discipline or behavior in ways where it was about their nervous system. It was about my nervous system.
yeah.
As you shared that, it was about what you do to kids. It was the application of a strategy or an intervention.
Hmm.
And so as I share often, resistance is a stress behavior. Resistance is all about that stress cycle activated in us. And so it's when I say we're cracking the code, social and emotional learning here, at least in the United States, has kind of come full circle in that it was real trendy and kind of, everyone embraced it about 8 years ago, started to embrace it. And then it really began to become, I feel, distorted and misunderstood. And, it was resisted because school is a place of academic, cognitive learning and testing. And so we don't have room, I wasn't trained to do this. This is not my role or responsibility. And so, and then there were many parent groups in the United States that were very resistant to having any type of social and emotional learning. This has been over the last 4 to 5 years. This is our family's business. This is not the school's,
Mm,
business. So I really have moved away from social and calling it SEL or social and emotional learning because for those very reasons. It's much more than that. It really is the neuroeducation of the nervous system.
mm,
And it really is not being evaluative or judging or, labeling or classifying. It's not about implementing a program to fix someone. Although we have so many initiatives in our schools still that are and again, there are programs across the globe that are addressing social and emotional learning, but that also is distorted because it's who we are. It's our beingness. It's a part of, it's just a part of our every minute interaction. That's what we misunderstand. It's not from 10 to 10:30 and we check it off and we're done teaching it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Absolutely. And the irony is like when schools say this isn't our role or this isn't our responsibility, it's like, how do we learn? Like, we're actually learning about how we learn when we learn about our body and our sensations and our brain as well. So, if we want to actually see a child know what to do to support themselves, to learn, to achieve on a test, well, then that's what they're going to get from doing work around this.
You're absolutely correct. You said that so well. And that's something I've been really sharing lately is that, we know the brain is built from the back to the front. And that survival brain, that brain stem, and again, the brain doesn't work in regions or sections,
Yeah.
but, just for us right now, but the brainstem is all about survival. And then we move into that limbic area where, we, are processing emotion. That's where we can begin to feel connected. And then we learn. But we put learning first. And so many of our children and youth, and we are not here. We're not in the cortex when the school day begins. We're not able to write a persuasive paragraph or figure out surface area or, complete an algorithm because we don't have a strong oxygenated glucose blood flow right here. And so when you're living in that midbrain, lower brain region, you're in survival. And
Mm.
for me as a teacher, and this is what I did this afternoon, right? As I shared with you before we started recording, I walked into my fifth grade classroom this afternoon and it was just chaos and angry chaos, not being silly chaos, but I mean, they were angry. And I learned they had lost their recess
Oh.
and other things. They've been testing all week, but they were not even close to being ready to talk about their brain or the nervous system. And so I had to meet them where they were this afternoon. And it was very challenging. I mean, it was so my point is we have to warm up our nervous system to be able to access the cortex. We've got to have those morning meetings or afternoon gatherings, which we did this afternoon. We processed in silence. We turned down the lights. We turned on some sound bath music. I had them write or draw what was angering them. They were mad about that. A lot of them just crumbled the paper. And I shared that it was just a choice and it's okay. They didn't need to. So I really tried to give some autonomy back to them after the morning they'd had. So those are examples. That's why I'm going
Mm.
into detail. Those are examples of how we have to take our own deep breaths, step back, and to realize that I could not continue to work beside them or teach them anything in the next couple of hours when they were in that nervous system state.
Absolutely, yeah. They're really powerful examples, actually, Laurie. I'm really glad you shared that experience because it also says to everyone as well that it's not about perfecting the situation and going, all right, I've got my class completely humming along every single day. As you said at the
Oh,
start, we're all living
yeah.
systems, and we're bringing all those living systems into the school and becoming one big living system. So there's so many factors at play when we put young people in a room together.
Oh, I just didn't know what I was going to do. Honestly, I want your listeners to know. I mean, here I speak about this across the world. I had no idea what to do.
Mm,
I mean, I
mm-hmm.
literally had a few minutes where I shared with them. I just shared, I'm not sure what we're going to do here, but I can feel my amygdala firing. I said I can feel my heart racing. I can feel myself getting hot. They understood that. And that was how we began to process together.
Mm, beautiful modeling as well. So, like, as we know, it's not about young people learning that they have dysregulation at times. It's about going,
Mhm.
human beings have dysregulation. This was something that I felt really important when I do work alongside schools. Sometimes they sort of come from the angle of going, oh, I'm about to have some students enrolled that have experienced trauma. What do we do with them? And it's like, well, actually, no, you do this with everyone. You normalize that this
Everyone.
is happening for anyone. And then when that child does potentially have days that are quite challenging, the rest of the room's going to understand that, hey, they're going through a challenging time because we've learnt about what this is like. And this person must be
Mhm.
going through something hard, not about having a plan just for them.
No, and that's so interesting too. You're making such excellent points because the framework is tier one. We call that in the
We
United
have tiers
States,
here as well. Yeah,
yeah. And so it's like you said, it's for everyone. I mean, and really, it's we all have experienced adversity and trauma. You can't live on this earth without having trauma in your life. And I think many of us, even in our developing years, we may think that we didn't, but I think
mm,
there are, periods of time that either we repressed or were held in like an implicit memory where we really don't have the narrative for that. So I've been approached by many educators saying, Lori, this child comes from a loving home. They come fed, they're rested. This is manipulative behavior.
I've heard that a lot
And
too.
yeah. And so that is something that, we all have to really get curious about and think about because trauma is unique, even though it's ubiquitous, it's very unique. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and we
I
won't we
know.
won't ever know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This might be a nice segue then, Laurie. I actually have started saying to the audience that they're able to submit questions that they can ask the guest.
Mhm.
And I did actually get a really good question from someone who is a brilliant teacher who I know has been following along for quite a while. And she
Mhm.
reached out and actually said, next year, because like in Australia, our school year is about to end and it starts again in
That's
February.
right.
Yeah, so she
Mhm.
actually said next year she knows she's going to be working with a young person who she's been told has a trauma background, and also there's a lot of reports of violent behaviour. So she was asking, what should she do to understand her and to connect with her early?
Such a great question. And one of the challenges is that sometimes when we are told about a student ahead of their being beside us, we can create a perceptual map of the challenges because of our negative bias. So I would encourage this educator to really tap in and to get to know the strengths of this child and as soon as they can, to get to know their interests, um, to build relationship, to build and strengthen that relationship at the very beginning by validating and noticing. So validation is one of the most powerful practices that human beings have in our nervous system because it's really listening to learn and listening for the feeling and not to respond. So I think validating this brilliant student, noticing anything that, that is even the smallest thing, like a logo on a t-shirt that he or she wears, a smile, tears, a tattoo, a missing tooth, just checking in. I think
Yeah.
just giving this student an opportunity to have a voice immediately and to feel a sense of inclusivity.
Beautiful answer. Absolutely. Laurie,
Mhm.
I do a lot of work around like with social workers and youth workers. I don't know if I'm assuming you would as well in your space. And something that
Mhm.
was interesting, I actually had a young person come on the podcast to talk about their experience because they had a lot of service support in their youth, and they were talking about care team meetings where a bunch of adults will come around, like professionals will sit around and come together once a month to talk about that young person. And it's, to get a bit of an update around how things are going, to make plans. And the young person is invited into those, but often they won't go because it's quite confronting. But he would go because he was a curious sort of person. And I'm curious about that situation for a young person as well, because I've always tried to work alongside groups of people doing that, to be very strengths focused and to be very inclusive with the
Mhm.
young person. But I'm wondering if you have any tips around processes like that, and any thoughts around how we can make that a much more nurturing experience for young people.
Well, I that's so interesting, and I think that I almost see two gatherings there. I see a gathering where we plan for that student to we center the meeting on the student if that's what they would choose. And that's a time where we get to know them. That's a time where, and that they get to know us so that they're not feeling called out or they're not feeling like it's all about them. And they get an opportunity to ask us the same questions.
Mm,
So I feel like that is that beautiful serve and return that that feels like it feels fair, for lack of a
mm,
better word. It feels very fair. And so if there is a meeting where a student wants to attend, or we really honestly invite them to be a part of it, then it needs to be really about everybody, and that it, even though it is about the student, we all need to be able to share what we ask of that student as well. Um, and then I think it's a really and not either or question. And I think then we can gather if we do have concerns or challenges about a student, then I think it's really important to have lots of different input. I think that is really important because some educators will see some behaviors that others won't. We'll see some antecedents that others don't see, patterns, gaps. Some of us will notice timing, we'll notice days of the week, or we'll notice certain classes that activate the nervous system. So it's really, I think we have a couple of resources that we share with teachers. One is called Recast. And it's based on Lucy Jane Miller's research. She is just she was, I think she's retired now, but she did a lot of work in sensory processing.
mm,
Um, and so Recast is on my website. Everyone can have it. And it really peels back the layers of behavior and looks at relationships, environment, culture, affect. It looks at sensory um, activators, and then tasks. So I just kind of went through the acronym right there. We also, in the new manual, Body and Brain Brilliance, that just came out in September, we have another resource called the Eco Map. And I have been speaking to that a lot lately. I love it. It is, it's a touch point, and it's where um, we do one, like it's really important for educators, the adults, to do their own eco map to see what people or places they feel connected to. Then we can do that with a student in a group, so all of us can give input to um, some of the connections that we see that are working well for the student, and some of the maybe toxic or stressful connections that we need to pay more attention to, or places even. So touch points are not just people. Touch points can be spaces in a building,
mm,
classrooms, hallways, restrooms, um, cafeteria, parking lot. I mean, there's just so those we really pay attention to spaces and people, and then also practices. So, maybe what are the touch points for the student that maybe they love, art, maybe they love to speak in front of people. Maybe they are musical, they love to drum. So, those are some of the things in the eco map that we go through.
I love that. That's such a strong thing. Is it something that gets reviewed or gets checked in over time as well to see how these things are
Yes.
shaping? Yeah, yeah.
Yes, and it's just brand new. So I mean, literally, we just rolled it out. So I'm very excited to see how schools, we'll begin to use it because I think you could use it in different ways, but I definitely think we need to continually, you know, reevaluate and to go back in and say, oh, this, here's another touch point here for the student. Or here's an example. So a solid line means you have a strong connection. A dotted line or a broken
Oh,
line
yeah.
says it's a little wobbly or unsteady. And then a line filled with X's is a stressful touch point. So if there is a broken line, a dotted line, let's say with the bus driver. So let's say this, that's a connection for the student, but it's a broken line, meaning it's a little wobbly or unsteady. So how do we strengthen that? How do we really empower the bus driver to know that this is a potential touch point for the student? The student
Mm.
finds some enjoyment with you. And so how can we create a solid connection, riding the bus and being with you?
I love that. And what would we do if we saw a stressful connection?
So, and that, that's something that, we would, as a group, I think we would have to think, okay, if this is a space that feels toxic to the student, then we need to work hard to, create something different in the space. Find out what is it about the space. If it's a person, then, we have to really think, like some of our students will have filled it out, like, they'll put X's getting ready for school in the morning.
Mm.
So I think, with being very respectful to family cultures, I think it would be ideal if families could be a part of the eco map, but
Mm.
that's not always a reality either.
Yeah.
Because so many caregivers and parents have had negative experiences with school that they stay away.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So that's why I think we have to brainstorm. We have to come together and think about, how, what do we do with those stressful places or touch points? And
Absolutely.
some
Yeah.
of them, yeah, some of them we can lessen, but some of them, we'll have to work around or work through those.
Yeah, and look, and sometimes if you can get some of those almost like those dotted connections, if you can get more strong connections, then
That's right.
sometimes we don't need the stressful spaces as often. We can have a lot of
It,
strength in the
abs-
space.
it's You're exactly right. It's almost like I love that. I think it was Harvard that put out the teeter-totter showing with the fulcrum. Do you know what I type? And they show that, we can find a balance, and that's what we're talking about. If we can strengthen more of those kind of unsteady or wobbly connections, then, we're leaning into plasticity and growth
Mm,
rather than, the toxicity of those experiences that
yeah.
feel to be so negative.
And then our coping strategies are incredible the more strength we have in the space as well. So then when we do
Absolutely.
come across those stressful or toxic, we might be more equipped to deal with it.
Yes,
Mm,
absolutely.
yeah, such
Yeah.
powerful work, Laurie. I'm like so excited talking to you about all of this,
Oh,
to be honest, because sometimes
thank you.
it can feel really difficult when you're working in spaces where young people have been excluded from schools, because ultimately that's who I used to work with, was young people excluded. And we were definitely, I will admit, we were very well resourced to do the work we needed to do. But a lot of the time,
Hmm.
this stuff can work in mainstream, larger settings as well. And I just think we can prevent a lot of those young people being excluded from spaces.
Absolutely.
Mm,
And our kids know, I mean, they know how they're seen. And this is, and I can speak here in the United States, we label kids early. We give them these classifications so early, and that is so detrimental,
mm,
in their development. And that is, we tend to box them in with these labels and classifications, and then you begin to live up to those,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And our system's so flawed in that way too, because often those boxes and those labels bring funding. So that's how we go, oh, we can support that child because they now have a label. And the system is
Exactly.
influencing that and supporting that process to keep happening.
And that's where we have to really provide the knowledge and the information to caregivers and parents to be the advocates, um, for their children. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Laurie, we're going to be coming close to the end of our time together, and I always end the podcast with 5 questions for my guest. So, are you ready if I ask you 5 questions?
Okay, I'm ready.
The first one is, what did you want to be when you were a kid?
A veterinarian. And yeah, absolutely. I am a huge animal lover. And no doubt about that was what I wanted to do.
Laurie, do you know what's really interesting? That is the most common answer that my guests give, including myself. That is my answer as well. And so there's
You're
something,
kidding.
no, it is, that's why I was just like kind of smiling when you said that. There's something really interesting about these people that have wanted to be a vet and have ended up working in some capacity with young people in social work or education in some way.
Wow, that is fascinating.
It is. It is.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I almost feel like we've all got that empathy and compassion as a child, obviously. Like we're wanting to,
Maybe.
yeah, and then for some reason we end up moving into working with human beings instead. But
Yeah. That's
mm.
here I am with our sweet 12-year-old cat right here on my lap. She's been here the whole time of the recording.
I love that. The second
Mhm.
question is, what are your 2 top values? If you can narrow it down to just 2.
Hmm. I I'll probably name two and then think, oh no, there'll be something later. I think I really value authenticity. I think that is something that is, just really, really important in for all of us is to be able to say and feel, what is in our gut. And I think that I hope that I've given that to my own children and not just, to my students because I'm a mom of three now young
Yeah.
um, and young adults. And so I think that's really important. That's a value that I hold. And I don't know if this is a value or not, but I really feel like I value the plasticity and the flexibility that life provides us because so often we just become so stuck and stagnant in our beliefs. And I just think that the nervous system is always evolving and learning. So I think I
Mm.
value the plasticity and the adaptability and flexibility of the nervous system.
I actually really like that answer. So even if it's not a value, it definitely is now.
Okay.
The third question is a little bit more silly, but so bit of context to it. I actually train in the sport of boxing, so boxing's a huge like part of my life. And so
Yeah.
I ask every guest, if you were going to have a boxing fight, what would be the song they would play as you walk towards the ring?
I think it's that, I don't know if this is the title of it, but I really like the song by Katy Perry, That Girl's on Fire.
Ah,
I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
Is that the title? I don't
I
know.
don't know
Or
either,
She's
but
on
well,
Fire or
I'll,
something.
I'll definitely be able to find
I,
it.
yeah,
I know the
that's
one you're
it.
talking about. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
The fourth question is, if you could collaborate with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I don't know. I'm just trying to think of, I feel like I would love to collaborate with some of the greatest spiritual teachers from all religions. To I just would love to be in a room with different spiritual masters from all of the religions.
Mm,
And because I think that we in our world today can become very exclusive again with how, our way is the right way or the way I believe is the only way to believe. And I would love to be collaborating with just a group of very differentiated spiritual leaders.
I love that answer. That's a great one. That would be so interesting.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
last question, Laurie, is if you could make one recommendation as a step that anyone could take towards healing, what would it be?
Listen to your body. We've been conditioned out of our bodies, and don't be afraid to listen because our nervous system is always trying to protect us, and it's always trying to move us from states of protection into states of growth. So begin to communicate with your body because when your body is speaking, it will tell us what we need, but we often don't listen because we haven't learned how.
Mm, brilliant answer. Very powerful one. Laurie, I'm
Mm.
so grateful that you gave this time today. Like, thank you so much for this
Um,
conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to share before we did part ways today?
no, I don't think so. Just that you can find all of the resources. They're all, most of them, like 95% of them, are free and downloadable on my website. And they're for parents, clinicians, teachers, administrators, social workers, counselors. And yeah, you can find those at revelationsineducation.com.
Thank you so much, Laurie, and I'll make sure there's a link for that in the show notes as well.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Megan, so much.
Thank you.